Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron Ogti and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
Hi, my name is Aaron Ogti. I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area. I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast.
Hey, Aaron, great to be here today. And thanks everybody for listening and watching.
Good to be here as well. So last time we went through a life planning exercise called Ideal Day Week Year. And we did pretty good on our ideal day. I thought we did pretty well on our ideal week, but we got distracted, which is not unusual for us. We never even got to ideal year. So today we're going to try and finish up that exercise of our ideal year. I don't want to rehash too much of our ideal day and week, but before we move on to ideal year, Trishul, is there anything you want to follow up or add on to our conversation last time that we didn't get to because of our normal distractions?
Yeah, happy to. So for those listening, this conversation was released, I guess, a few weeks ago, but it was recorded probably many, many weeks before that. And now we're picking this up. So there may be a little discontinuity in the train of thought there, but we'll try our best to pick up that frame of reference we were in. But I did scribble some notes at the end of that conversation. So I think that might be a good segue into this one. And one thing that kind of stood out to me as we were going through the ideal week is I recall you had presented your ideal day, and a quick rehash on that was it sounded like a day in the life of Aaron with his family, going through his daily routine, dealing with kids and balancing work and social life, and going through the motions of what you've been able to craft in terms of something that you feel is a comfort zone for you. And then you had mentioned your ideal week, and it ended up being something pretty different from that ideal day, where it would be a scenario that you've played out over many occasions in your personal life, where it might be a week where you and your wife take off and you get to do all these activities. Kids aren't necessarily part of the picture. Maybe they could be, but they don't have to be. But it's just this notion of you're less encumbered. You're doing more things that are less structured as that ideal day might be. And it just feels like something that you cherish. And then,
okay. So I do want to. I think I'll take it from there because I do want to make one thing clear. I made it very explicit. It was trips with my wife without my kids. It was okay. Those were the ideal weeks.
Like I do want to highlight that so broadly, but yes, that is true.
But I do. So like, I do think I understand what you're saying. Like, my ideal day had work in it, and I've been playing a lot of pickleball in the morning, so I had pickleball or kind of sports or a combination of exercise. I was probably coaching something in the afternoon with my kids, but the ideal week had none of that.
Yeah.
And I do think it's a fair question, and I'm glad we came back to that because I do kind of want to describe the like moments and times where I feel like just, oh, this is great. I'm like present enough in the moment, and like I am really genuinely happy right now. And one of those big feelings is when I get on a plane. I have gone through the airport, gone through security, gone through boarding, and now sitting on the plane. I actually love that feeling. I sit down, and through some other work, I figured out like it's that feeling of like I have no responsibilities for right now. There's nothing I can do right now that will change anything else. Someone else is driving. I get to just sit, probably watching a movie on my iPad, but that like that temporary removal of expectations. And my wife actually described something very similar. She went to the dentist the other day and told me afterwards had the exact same feeling of couldn't check her phone. If the school called, she couldn't do anything. She couldn't respond to that. Didn't have to worry about doing the work on the kitchen. Like if I called, she could not answer the phone. She had to sit in the chair and literally do nothing for an hour. And despite like all the like not liking the dentist part, she actually had a similar feeling. And I think that's what I try to illustrate of that ideal week feeling. And because a lot of times it might be a long weekend, but it's that temporary removal of just expectations and responsibilities. Sometimes I can get that when I go out to dinner by myself one day a week, and I'll get back to like a ideal week that's not vacation kind of idea. But that feeling, because even on my normal ideal day, it still felt I got to play pickleball. I got to coach my kids. I love doing those things. I got some work in. I'm very proud of myself. Like I have that self-worth validation. It's still got to wake up at 7 a.m. Make sure my kids are getting out of bed. Uh, I have a morning routine to make sure that each of my kids gets out the door on time. I need to walk the dog so that I can get back because it's a 30-minute walk. I love my walk. It's really peaceful in the morning, but I have to get it started by like 7:50 to 8 a.m. so that I can get back to the house by 8:20 to 8:30 so I can get out to pickleball court to get a good hour and a half in to be done by 10 to get here to record. So even on the great days, it's still like alarms going off on my watch. It's still this structure that when I have the opportunity to remove that feeling, that also feels great. And so that's why I say like my ideal days have a lot of structure. And so when it comes back to it, it's similar on my ideal weeks at home or not on vacation where I like taking the kids out to food trucks, and they happen to be in our area on Wednesday evenings. So one day a week we've been going to food trucks, and each kid and I get to do uh, different dinners. We to choose what we want. There's very little complaining. And my wife that's the day that she goes out and just goes by herself. So my wife has no kid responsibilities that evening. Other days in the past, I'll have played softball some evenings. Haven't done that in a few months, but I want to try and get back into that just between my elbow injury and other things. Haven't got that, but that would also be one evening a week. I do like football season, so I'm a big Chargers fan. So looking forward to Sundays when I get to watch the Chargers. That like in that weekly rhythm of the things I get to do once per week. I like watching Monday Night Football. So sometimes I'll go out to like BJ's or Lazy Dog. I'll have dinner at a place that will be showing Monday Night Football. Sometimes I'll do it on Thursday nights, but like one of those 2 days. If it's not softballs, no football, I might go see a movie. So my ideal week would probably either have softball, a movie, or an evening football game that I'm going to do by myself or like with a team. But it's so I try to get that feeling of being away from kids, but it is very specifically like, okay, for the next couple hours, I have no responsibilities. I just get to sit here and I can look at my phone, I cannot, I can kind of there's no one like asking me a dozen questions. That's kind of like, and I think that's where we got distracted on that ideal week structure last time. But I do love the vacations. I also do have good ideal weeks, and there are certain activities that I'll do once per week that are very much included in that. The actual day sometimes changes, but that's a pretty good rhythm. It's usually so recently it's been my son plays soccer on Saturday mornings. I've been coaching my oldest daughter's flag football team, and then my middle daughter plays softball Sunday mornings, and then we go home and watch the Chargers. Like, add in some watching something by myself in the evening, add in food trucks Wednesday evenings, and the rest of my Monday through Friday is like my ideal week or ideal day that I described previously, and that feels pretty good. I like that. But again, a lot of planning, a lot of structure. I had to like keep my brain on kind of thing. I do enjoy at the end of the evening if I can play Zelda on the Switch. That also always feels nice. So that it's a fair question, but I think I'm conscious and aware of the times where I know I have a structure and the times where I know I have no structure, I have no responsibilities. This feels awesome.
Right.
Do you have any like shared sentiment, or like do you ever have that feeling of I don't have any responsibilities for the next 2 hours? This feels awesome.
It's very interesting that you began with that airplane analogy, because I felt that before. Certainly, I remember, um, even before I had kids. When I was busy in the corporate world and doing the whole 9 to 5 job, and at some point the corporate world transitioned to, if you're in the financial markets, you got to be on call 24/7. No
Yeah.
matter what is going on.
There's always
And
a
those
market open somewhere.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And at the time, we were trading global markets, so literally any time of day, something was going on of interest. But it would be those hours where you're on the plane, where internet access wasn't ubiquitous at that time,
Yeah.
and you're on a flight and you can't be reached. But you
Yeah.
get that feeling of, oh boy, there's literally nothing that
Yeah.
I can do right now. And it is freeing. I definitely have felt that before in that past life. And it's interesting, because then I do actually compare that now to my life these days, and I feel like, excuse me, I feel like my days do have more of that, or there's more opportunities for that than
Mhm.
was in the past. Like in the past, there was literally periods where the entire month, every single hour, including
Yeah.
weekends, are scheduled, and there's no flexibility. If you get sick, oh boy, there goes the
Yeah.
dominoes for the for the next whatever so and so. But it's different now. Yeah, when I look at my ideal day, for example,
I think you
there.
described like was it Mondays and Fridays when you drop your daughter off at daycare and then you go to the park?
Yeah. So on those days, I'll literally be taking a hike in the woods where there's no cell phone reception
Yeah.
for a couple hours, and this will happen once or twice a week. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you get that feeling, right? That feeling of mental rest, where
Yeah.
you don't have to be on, and you don't have to check things, and you can kind
Mhm.
of disconnect for a bit. It brought a lot of notions to my mind. For example, there's this understanding that discipline is helpful, but it has this bad connotation, right, in society.
Mhm.
Like, you're getting disciplined, you're getting whacked over the head with
Yeah,
a
yeah.
crowbar, right? But I think, in another sense, discipline is actually what can lead to freedom, right? By having that structure,
Mm.
you can actually have that opportunity to have less structure, proactively, instead of reacting to the not wanting of the discipline and then just kind of fumbling through
So
life, right?
I guess I've always like I had the complete opposite reaction to the word discipline. When I think of discipline, I think of it as a virtue. I think it was like, do you have that like internal discipline to control yourself? Um, I for again, I've been coaching middle school flag football, so like just the discipline and not go off sides is something that like, comes up a lot. But I've also been talking to a lot of clients and pushing them to block off your calendar after 3 o'clock. Like take no meetings. And this is because they want to be able to spend time with their kids. Kids go home from school. They're still doing amazing at work. They're getting everything done. And sometimes they might work in the evening, sometimes not. But do you have the discipline to not accept a meeting between 3 and 5 p.m.? And I've used that word, and it's more of a self-control when I think of where it uses up willpower to maintain discipline. But I've never thought of it I tend not to think of it in terms of like disciplining my children, even though, you know what, actually that's right. No, I want to say, even in that context, my wife and I are kind of proud of the discipline we've had with our children, where we never gave in to tantrums. We never let them have their way. And maybe there's discipline on our part. And so now we feel very comfortable. Our youngest is 7. We can go to a restaurant, we can travel. And when we say, you can go to that bathroom over there and come back to here, we trust that they'll do exactly what we told them to. And they won't go wandering off. Like, we have, like, the discipline we've had in the past as parents has now paid off in trust that we have that they will listen to us, and we're willing to give them more freedoms.
Right. Yeah. And that's just it. So when you think of discipline, though, do you think of the word freedom?
I guess I want to say yes, but it's more like a discipline leads to freedom idea. Like they're not tied together. But like, if you have discipline, then you can have freedom, kind of thing. Where if you can, for my clients, if you can make sure not to accept any meeting after 3 o'clock, you get to spend the time with your kids every day after 3 o'clock. Like, it's so hard because you're going to keep getting meeting invites and like, oh, I should really be in that meeting. Oh, man, that's kind of an important meeting. I should be there. Oh, that's my boss, like, scheduling a meeting. So like that discipline's hard, but if you can maintain it, like if you make sure you block off that time, like you get to do nothing, but you have to do nothing in this like 3-hour window.
Right. Yeah. So I guess you can kind of look at it as opposite sides to the same coin, right? Like, if you take this notion of freedom naively, you kind of think, oh, you can do anything you want whenever you want. You're free.
Yeah.
Right. And that's that's one version of freedom, right? It's the connotation of freedom that is lacking of discipline. And then you can take the same notion of discipline to an extreme. Like, you're so disciplined that you're doing everything to a level of, like OCD, where you're not getting any freedom at all, right? And the notion is there's a balance there where having one can help foster the other, right? And
I do like that. I saw a quote the other day that reminds me of it's like, you can do anything you want at any time. You can't do everything you want all the time.
All the time, yeah.
And so like, you get to choose whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it, and you can build your life around that.
Yeah.
But you can't never work or like whatever like the necessities of your life are. Like, I can't ignore my kids every day.
Yeah.
I have to like have the discipline on there early enough that I can trust them to behave for grandparents, and it actually pays, like, grandparents want to watch them while we travel because they're behaved well enough, and because they aren't creating and adding stress to our grandparents' lives, they're adding joy to their grandparents' lives. So I do think that it's, you can have freedom if you have this way. I think you're right. You do need, it's like you need both to have either.
Right. Yeah. So I think I mentioned this quote before, so I'm just bringing it up right now, and I can even share it on the screen. I haven't even read it, so hopefully this one is correct. But here we go, real time. Let's see. Let's share something. All right. While I'll present. Here we go. All right. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'll read out the quote for the listeners here. Let's see. Okay. Is that big enough for you, Aaron?
Yes, that's good.
And maybe I even shared this before, but I'll read the quote now. So the quote is from Niels Bohr. He's a quantum physicist. And the way he came about this is he noticed this duality of nature where in quantum physics you have particles that behave as waves sometimes, and sometimes they're particles, and they're both technically at the same time, right? And so he started to notice this truth as it applies to existence, where there are trivial truths and then there are great truths. So the opposite of a trivial truth is plainly false, right? So this is blue, and the opposite of it is it's red. Well, that's plainly false. It's blue, right? But the opposite of a great truth is also true, right? So the notion here is, yes, you need discipline, but if you focus just on that, you'll give up its opposite, freedom.
Yeah.
Both is what you need, or is what's important, is what provides meaning, and it's that balance of the two. And this is true for any great truth, right, that you can think of.
I think that balance idea is also the hard part, where just too many times in a wide variety of human experiences, it's almost easier to do all or none. Like you're all in or you're all out. And it's most people, it's you work really, really hard. The work hard, play hard. Yeah, you work really hard and you're on vacation and like you do nothing. Or you work hard for several decades and you retire and you don't ever have to work again.
Right.
And that ends up being the way for most people. But I think that's one of the things that I've been trying to live and trying to help my clients with. Like, no, if you can find that balance, it is possible to work hard sometimes and play hard sometimes, or have the freedom to do nothing if you have the discipline to do something other times.
Right.
I think most there's almost like a willpower aspect, and then there's research like your willpower fades throughout the day. Like it just requires actual energy, and so that's why you end up breaking your diet in the evening. It's easy in the morning, it's hard at night, kind of thing. But I think that does take willpower to have that balance, where it's almost like it's less willpower to have the discipline. Just it's on my calendar. I do this every day. Like that's requires less willpower. But to have that, you have to do nothing for this 3-hour period. It is like there's your freedom, but that's hard. Like, ooh, but I can get this other stuff at work done. Right. Like I got this extra time now.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I think a few of the analogies I see is, that there's the standard day and then there's the vacation, right?
Yeah.
And the notion is you keep the routine for the standard day, you keep the discipline so that you can enjoy the vacation. And the balance, the vacation can be, you work really hard consistently and you get a week off, every couple months or whatever, or you incorporate that into your day, however you want to break it down.
Yeah.
But that's the balance, right? That's, maybe the first thing to understand is it's not one or the other. It is a balance. And that balance is what you have to decide for yourself, right? Is the second most important thing. And then finding that balance is the hard work. That's why all of this is not trivial. And that might be true for all of these complexities of life, and according to Bohr, like existence in general, right? It's a balance of great truths.
Okay, so I use that segue of 1 week of vacation every 2 months, which I think is more vacation than most people in the U.S. have. But I try to do something similar. So let's move on to what we're trying to get done today. What does your ideal year look like? What would be the kind of some of the things that you look forward to throughout the year, some of that rhythms that you see?
Yeah. So, when I described my ideal day, and then I transitioned to week, it was pretty much a variation of that theme, right? Some sort of balance of a good amount of discipline, but enough of that freedom that I enjoy each and every day. And I try to pull that into my week. And then from there, the transition to year is not so bad. And It is certainly a balance because, like, for example, this past summer, we had the opportunity to take like 3 or 4 weeks off, and we just did a lot of traveling and things like that. And then week 3 out of 4 into our vacation, my wife and I both agreed, hey, we're vacationed out here. Like we want to get back in. And I started to miss the structure, right? I started to miss the routine. So there's a limit as well, on how much freedom one can handle and still be comfortable with it. And again, it's that balance. You can over optimize on the freedom front as much as you can on the discipline front. Yeah. Even if you have the ability to go far beyond what you might dream for, in either case. So, when it comes to that ideal year, I think we're learning, for example, as far as a cadence, the weekly cadence works very well. And then, maybe what we've kind of structured into our annual lives is one small vacation every month, on like a long weekend or something. So like 12 of those a year, and 2 big vacations a year on top of that. Seems to round things out. And then there might be something more extended during the summer. And that seems to provide the right amount of flexibility so that we don't feel like we're too burnt out from the discipline side and too unencumbered from the freedom side.
So what, I guess this is like, I'm just now realizing almost how lucky my wife and I are that based on the kids' school calendar. And what I mean by that is the school and the district done a good job of, like, summer break is shorter, but there's extra weeks throughout the year. So we had a week off in October. So we went to Disneyland and visited some friends in Southern California. We got to see my brother-in-law, and we kind of had a few days. We're just like, we didn't have anything planned after Disneyland, so we're just kind of hanging out, and that was nice. And then we went back to school the next week. They have the week of Thanksgiving off, so I've blocked that off of my calendar. I'll probably get a little bit of work done, but we have nothing particular planned for those first 3 days before Thanksgiving. They have a kind of longer winter break, so we actually have the week off before Christmas, and so we're gonna go up to Tahoe and go skiing and snowboarding. And so, like, as I was thinking, like, these are the things I've been looking forward to in my mind, and they all line up with, like, kids being off of school. And then there's I think they have a week off in March. Before that, they have a long weekend in February. We're going to do another Tahoe trip with family. So it'll be cousins coming up joining us. A week off in March. We're planning a staycation. We're going to do a lot of stuff in the Bay Area that we haven't done in a while or haven't done ever. But, like, trying to actually do all the tourist things that we kind of, because they're so close, we haven't done them. Then we actually are planning a trip to Europe next summer when kids get out of school. And when I think about this, I do kind of realize that we take advantage of all the time the kids have off, and we'll probably have another week in Tahoe next summer. We will, and then, like, probably like the other big thing I look forward to is my fantasy football draft weekend. It's always the weekend before Labor Day weekend. We draft in a different city, so I'm seeing friends from all over the country from college and, like, we always look forward to that. But, like, there's always, like, a next.
Where was it this year?
I won last year, so we drafted in Tahoe this year.
Awesome.
So I am not going to win this year. I made certain future concessions to improve my team last year. But it paid off, and I had the championship belt, and not going to win this year.
Is that a physical belt?
It is. We have someone got like a pro wrestling or pro boxing kind of championship belt that we engrave our names on a little plate.
Nice. Wow.
So
that's awesome.
So yeah, we bring that to the draft every year and get to carry it around.
Hopefully you're taking a picture every year, and then you get the
We do
Instagram, whatever, or
well. So we do take a picture of the group every year,
yeah,
and but it's always like just in some random place that can host 15 people doing a draft. So it's like
yeah.
it's hard for the pictures to remind us of where the actual picture was taken. We just get older and older in the picture.
Right.
But I was saying like even so it's almost like going back, that ideal year part is a bunch of it's also like it's a bunch of ideal days with an ideal week thrown in. But like that was like without the kids, because that's always the ideal vacation. But vast majority of our trips are with kids. But yeah, it's throwing in enough of those little trips. Again, doesn't have to be big. It's usually like we have one big one next summer, but Tahoe's easy for us. Southern California is easy for us. Staying here is easy for us, and it's looking forward to. It's both the structure on the day. I get to go play pickleball. I get to coach their teams. I get to kind of do some good work, help clients. It's that daily structure, but I'm not looking forward to Monday or Tuesday like you've described. I am looking forward to those trips, and we have them spaced out enough throughout the year that we've really enjoyed that. And I think that's one of the things I think about when I think about my ideal years. It has enough of those breaks from the daily structure that,
Right.
and like always looking forward to the next thing.
I have two comments. The first one is, I remember again in the corporate world, the vacations didn't line up, or they wouldn't have.
No,
I left the world before my daughter was born, but they would not have lined up with.
no, they would not. No.
And the second thing is, I remember I remember two things. I remember when I was in Southeast Asia, I had 5 weeks off and like 20 national holidays or something
Okay.
crazy like that, because they used to celebrate the Chinese holidays, the local Malay holidays, the Indian
Okay.
holidays, and then it's just 5 weeks on top of that, because that's how it is out there.
Yeah.
And then, when I joined like the hedge fund here, I remember my first year, my vacation days were zero. Like your first year, you work on the weekends
Yes.
too. And you have to start accumulating after your first year.
Yeah.
But even in Southeast Asia, though, I recall there was some stress when you had to take off, because things had to line up. I was in a managerial position at the time, and you got to make sure the team is running smoothly. And if stuff happens, and of course you're dealing with the market, and that adds its own whatever. But I imagine that's similar to many situations in the corporate world, where your kids may have 8 weeks, 9 weeks off,
Yeah.
Cumulatively over the year. And it's very tough to have that in a W-2 position, for example,
Yeah.
unless you're pretty tenured. So
one of the things that, just kind of filling in some of the gaps, there have been a lot of camps that have kind of emerged as both like, and this is like capitalism work of like opportunity and people providing to fill that opportunity.
yeah.
So during summers, you do all the camps are like 1 week at a time, and so you like choose one camp to the next. And those function like a daycare / like they're old enough they don't need the actual supervision, but keeps them occupied. And now they actually do have camps that fill in those October gaps, the November gap, and so they do have solutions there when the kids have more time off than you do.
Right. Yeah. I imagine some notion of that would be required. Even in the more traditional sense, like when I was in grade school, you had a long summer and I guess less days throughout the year. Maybe spring break for like 4 or 5 days, but beyond that, Thanksgiving was 2 days, winter holidays was a week, and so on. But that's a gap for working families that is hard to fill unless you have some sort of program. I went to summer school, right, within the public school system, so that certainly helped fill in that time. But even so, I felt there was a difference taking a vacation as an employee versus an entrepreneur. I think, maybe it was the careers I was in or the positions I was in, but I always felt there was a sense of stress in not being able to fully disconnect. And then on the flip side, there were periods where you could take the day off, but you said you would be there, and now you got to fill up a day, even though it would look bad if you just left.
That's what I was going to get to. When I was an employee, we definitely had kind of ebbs and flows and kind of workflow. They had an okay vacation policy. Is probably something like 4 weeks throughout the year. But they did they tried to, like, I don't say make up for it, but they acknowledged that, hey, we don't have a lot of we need to get done. We'll go to lunch for 2 hours. And so, like, and there was a camaraderie component of the fact that we were going to lunch together as an office, and it wasn't a vacation day, but it was an easier day. But like you said, I couldn't take that afternoon off and, like, go do that. Also, like, I can't plan a vacation or even a half-day trip, like, that morning. Right. And so it's like you said, like, you said you'd be there, so even if you didn't have anything to do and you left, you don't have anything to do. It's like, okay, I guess I'll go see a movie at 2:00.
Right.
It was different. But they did try kind of to acknowledge that there are times where the workload is lighter, and especially around that, like, end of the year, Christmas to New Year kind of thing. Like, there was so little to do because all of our clients are out celebrating or doing anything. Like, every now and then we had, like, oh, we have to get this done before the calendar year. So it's like you have a good solid 1 hour of work per day, maybe 2.
Well, see, I think here's what I've noticed, or the pattern, or here's roughly my point. I feel like the corporate culture in the US, for example, is geared towards putting those hours in. Whereas, like, we all kind of know this. In Europe, they have more vacation days. They're less lax about hitting 60-hour weeks and things like that. But I think what we're starting to understand is there's research that suggests that after a certain point, those extra hours don't really lead to extra productivity. And now there's initiatives to have, for example, the 4-day work week or flexible schedules, the work from home. That's a big one there, where spending those 2 hours commuting versus being able to have that as your own personal time is a big difference. If you make that 5 days a week, that's 10 extra hours of your free time. So, I guess my rough point is there are things that weren't necessarily optimal with how things used to be when I experienced them, or maybe how they are in some measure now. But it looks like there is a change of wind coming where the culture and evidence is suggesting that you don't necessarily have to be in front of a desk from 9 to 5 and still be a productive worker, 5 days a week, 50 weeks out of a year.
So I actually think this comes back to our discipline conversation, because most companies now offer unlimited time off. At least most kind of tech companies that my clients work for. They do it kind of for self-serving, so they don't have to track, like, vacation time owed.
Right. Yeah.
And, like, you still need, like, manager approval, and there's research that people actually take less vacation when it's untracked.
Right.
So I have been trying to push my clients that work at these companies to, like, really push the limits like this, but it becomes a discipline thing. Like, no, you got to stop working at 3:00. No, you got to take extra vacation time. Like, schedule that out, block it off, tell them in advance. And I genuinely believe it creates this kind of like scarcity effect with that employee, where the ones who have the discipline to be able to own their calendar still end up getting promotions and raises. Like they stay,
Right.
like they're still like, wow, you're doing so well. We're so like, man, I can't believe you're getting so much work done. And I wonder if it's like because they're parents, they are kind of more conscious of their time, like, and they're actually just more productive with those hours. It could be that with more work from home, they aren't displaying like the same kind of lax time around the office, where it's like they're getting 6 hours of work done in 6 hours, where everyone else is getting 6 hours of work done in 8 hours.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't have a good feeling of the cause, but I have, and it's more, and then my sample size is still kind of anecdotal, so I don't have a large enough sample size, but I do genuinely believe this plays out of if you can own your calendar, and like I think it's almost like the discipline leads to a confidence idea. It's like, no, I will not take that meeting with my boss at 3:30.
Right.
And like to actually say no to that. It's like,
Yeah.
can't believe my employee said no to me. Like they must be really important.
Yeah,
Like,
I think
got to do everything I can to keep that employee.
I think that there's a few dynamics here, but a good part of it is managing perceptions, of course, but also doing it proactively instead of reactively.
Yeah,
right.
I agree. Yep.
That's the notion where you're blocking these times out weeks in advance. You're setting the perception that you will be available between X and Y, and you fulfill that. You're actually there. Rather than having a larger time and then getting burnt out and then having to take more time off just because it's harder to maintain that high level of expectation for so long.
That is a great point. There's a big difference between someone asks you, hey, can you show up for this meeting? You say, no, I can't. I'm sorry. Versus, yeah, I think I can make that. And then you don't show up.
Right.
There's a huge, like, again, I think that manage expectations idea and doing it in advance where they're, because they don't, like, the managers, your bosses are people too, and they want you to be happy. They want you to do well. They want to support your life. And so when they want, in general, want to support your vacation time, because most managers aren't jerks.
Yeah.
I'd say, but yeah.
It's that whole phrase of, under promising and over performing, right? The notion is don't commit to more than you can handle, but do what you commit to, and you'll rise. People want assurance that when you say you'll do something, it gets done. That's what really matters, not the amount of things on your plate.
Yeah. That's a great point. I need to work with that in terms of communication with clients, of like trying to figure out why this has worked out so well. But again, it is so hard for my clients to, they've told me that, my wife has done the same thing, to say, no, I'm not taking that meeting. They get calendar invite comes, they've been ingrained, like, oh, it's between 9 and 5. I'm always available between 9 and 5 for meetings. And they start to get like, that's why they have meetings back to back to back to back to back. And then by the end of the day, they're exhausted. I have seen one of my clients described a structure, something like his meeting started at like 10:04. And it's like, 10:04, that's actually such a weird time. And like there's something like the standard meeting goes from the 4 to the 56 or something like that. Because they're noticing when they're in the office, they actually needed time for one group to get out of the room and the other group to get into the room. And if some people were virtual, they were like there 4 minutes early, just watching people shuffle in. There wasn't even like small talk. And if the meeting before had gone long, so like, I've seen a few others play around with this idea, but like, starting to create those like travel gaps, where it's literally back to back, because so many people have expressed when they do that via Zoom, it's just exhausting. And one of the things I've tried to do is I don't book anything at least half an hour, if not an hour, after a client meeting. So one, if they have extra questions, if they have the time, I have the time for them. Because
Right.
sometimes like, oh, I thought this would be 60 minutes. We're at 65, and then we still go another 15 minutes. Like, because it's just such a valuable meeting for them.
Yeah.
Other times, like, make sure I can get notes and other work done after.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that
Yeah.
I go ahead.
Well, so but part of my long-winded point is I've said part of this before. I get the feeling after all is said and done, I feel like I'm just as productive today as I used to be in my full, 50, 60-hour week career, because I've been able to trim the fat. I've been able
Yeah.
to cut out all the things, the commutes, the unnecessary meetings, the projects that aren't necessarily at the top of my list, and just focus on the core things. And when it's time to do the core things, I actually do them. And then I
Yeah.
get to do what I want, all the other times. So, I think by having that discipline to reorganize my life, I don't think I've given much up, but it's provided a lot more freedom in the ability to
Yeah.
make these choices.
I agree with that. And one point I do want to kind of like, as that entrepreneur idea, like when I go on vacation, I still check my email. If a client
Mhm.
calls or texts or emails, like I have taken 30-minute calls from Tahoe because they
Mhm.
had to make a work decision with the next day.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't bother me. It's
Yeah.
like I'm actually genuinely happy to help them,
Mhm.
and I have no problem doing it from Tahoe. I don't feel like I need to be completely cut off
Yeah.
because I'm not burnt out in the first place.
That's so right. Yeah, like there's a difference between having to take a 30-minute call versus being called back to the office on a weekend to do a presentation
Yeah,
for right a pet project, something like that.
yeah.
It's night and day. Because you get to control your own destiny, and you get to realize the importance of things and weight it based upon what's going on in your own life, and
Yeah,
you get to decide,
yeah.
hey, okay, yeah, we need to chat now. It'll take 30 minutes. We'll get past this, and then we'll table the other stuff for next week. Right? It's all possible.
I've 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 had thoughts, and also like again that establishing expectations idea. Like, uh, yes, I can talk to you on the phone. I have to pick up my son at 2:40. Okay,
Mhm.
it's gonna take me about 5 minutes to get from the car to my son's classroom.
Yeah.
So even though I have that blocked off my calendar because I don't want to take meetings right before I'm going to pick up my son, I was told like I can talk from about 2 o'clock to 2:35,
Mhm.
and I have had conversations in the car. Like I'll be in the car, audio is not great, can't do a Zoom meeting, but I'll talk to you. We can figure this thing out, and because again, there's always some kind of stressor,
Mhm.
and I just we want to talk, figure something out. Okay, it's 2:35. I have to go. But the
Mhm.
client knew in advance, like do it like so. The client did not see it as unprofessional for me to take this
Right.
phone call in the car and then cut off at 2:35 exactly because I had
Yeah.
established expectations. I
Yeah.
I have normally blocked off the calendar. After 2 o'clock on Tuesdays, I need to pick up my son for school. I might get a little extra work done with 10 minutes. Like I have a 10-15 minute leeway there, but I'm definitely not taking a meeting at that time. But
Yeah.
I was able to make an adjustment for the client, establish expectations, and the client was happy at that time.
Yeah,
So
it feels like a win-win-win. What's going through my mind now is, again, a key distinction in all this is we're self-employed, right?
yes, yes.
And it just makes me think, well, why can't that scale in the corporate world as well as it does for individuals? Being able to have this flexibility and still have it be better than the sum of the parts.
So I believe I know the answer to that, and it's along the scale of management not being able to measure productivity very well, especially across larger organizations.
Yeah.
So is how are the contributions of this individual to the large organization? Because you really can't tell. There's no way to actually measure that, and so they default to things like hours working or like maybe like manager judgment, which
Mhm.
is tending to be more biased and very ripe for just discrepancies from one manager to the next. And so if they're trying to provide any kind of quantitative analysis of individual employee production that's not like on a sales side, that some managers say like, yeah, this person's a rock star, give them whatever time they want. And this other person, like, they're doing okay. I'd like to see them work a little harder. But that's again, it's the expectations going the other way. It's the corporate management expectation for their employees of, we'd like you to be here and for the time that we pay you for. And you and I've got like, if I'm not meeting with clients, it's hard to tell the difference between like work, like I'm like, and this happens in the corporate world a lot, like for all employees, like client email, fantasy sports, ISO stock option analysis, looking at ESPN.com. Like it's that happens in the real world also, but there's no boss of like, are you spending too much time on the fantasy sports side and not aside on that client email? Like, no, as long as the client's happy, doesn't matter which one I do.
It's a tough one because I think the way the structure, we're also way off base in terms of. I just looked at the time and anyway, I'll say a sentence and then maybe we can table this for another conversation. But I think it's just tricky because the way the corporate system has been designed as like a traditional W-2 worker is it's a box and you have the time, you get paid, money comes in your account, time goes out of your life, right? And that's just how it's supposed to work, lockstep. And it seems like there's a revisiting of that theme as you know, culture and corporations are evolving and things are becoming more independent. Could probably say a lot more about all of this, but I don't know how far we want to deviate.
So I do think there might be one thing. I feel like management might be able to tell when teams are getting like projects done, and like I want to try and keep that as vague as possible, but like they can kind of like, oh, this group has been doing better than we expected. They solved this problem well, and they have to kind of leave it up to the manager of that team of like, okay, why is your team doing well? Is it your work? Is it all of the individuals working together? Do you have two people carrying the load? Like the team is doing well. Management can't see why the team is doing well. And
I think there's enough to say here on this because I've been in that situation. Like in my last two positions, I reported directly to the CEO and I had teams under me, high performing teams. And in both cases, my team was the sole revenue driver of each of those respective firms. So that this is the business essentially. And I hope, you know, my employees had that flexibility because essentially when it came to deadlines and meeting things, it was always a conversation of, okay, how long do you think it'll take? And I take their word from it for, you know, oh, it's going to take a week. Okay, great. I don't even push back. And if they do it and they get it done a week, no issues at all. If it takes longer, then we say, okay, why did that happen? And we try to figure out what may we do better next time and stuff like that. So, you know, I was given actually over time a pretty good amount of flexibility to create the team, build the team, push into new products, and you know, build the business and all of that. But I think there was still an expectation, even though I had all this freedom, you know, to craft a business, to meet what I think were more superficial expectations.
Okay. So
and
despite your success and results and like obvious freedoms, there's still like an underlying expectation on just showing up in the office every day. or
I
something
think there's
like
a difference, yeah, because I've always been a top performer, in all of these positions, and always, exceeded expectations from metrics and things like that.
that?
But it's different being your own boss. It's different being able to
So
say,
I wonder if it's the fact that you don't have one boss, you have 20 to 30. And each of those individuals knows that they can't occupy all of your time. And as long as you are, it's almost like in a weird way, like as long as you're making 95% of them happy, like it's like you could like even like drop the ball on one and the other 19 don't know. And like I don't think I've done. I know I've made mistakes. I think that's what I'm playing. I know I made mistakes, and I've apologized to clients for my mistakes. I
yeah,
definitely not perfect. And I think that intentions and expectations and being like human is there, but I think it's that idea of like I just need to make my 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 bar per client is lower than a W-2 employee's like bar per boss, if that makes sense.
mhm.
And as long as I clear all of these low bars, that might be easier than one person clearing one high bar.
Yeah. Well, I think it's all, some of it is really just cultural, meaning if you see a team that's getting all their work done, but nobody's behind their desk, it's a concern, right? For
I
the man cutting the checks, right?
yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
I think there's a different attitude in the corporate environment that I've seen play out with top level executives and CEOs, which fits the role, but it leads to this suboptimality that I'm mentioning here, where, like, for example, with Elon Musk, right? I heard this from like the individual who did his memoir, right? He had him follow him around for 8 years. And he has this great engineering mind, great innovation. But at the end of the day, stuff gets done because he has this underlying sense of worry that can sometimes spike to a level of probably irrationality. But when it does, it leads to a mass motivation that gets stuff done, right?
Okay.
And it's that edge, that paranoia, that's a good part of his success.
Okay.
And you want a multi-billion-dollar company that can excel at that level, then something like that may be necessary. However, it may not be ideal for everybody else who's not fully on board with that. And even if they are, they may be massively successful and they may get, perfect enumeration, but that feeling I don't think will be the same as it is being your own boss. One will increase GDP a lot more than the other, but we're talking more fuzzy numbers, more fuzzy outcomes than that alone.
I have one client. She's a really high performing employee, and one of the things that's come up is like, do you want the next promotion? And she's like, I don't want to have a like bat phone or red phone to my boss to be like on call.
Yeah. Well, okay, you nailed it right there. I think that's one of the things I had to have that, right, in all those positions, and that's the difference. That phone comes to me now because it's my business, but I can manage it a lot better than it coming from the CEO.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you want to try and describe your ideal year?
Here we go. Well, we have 45 seconds before the hour. So
okay.
Let's see. Eat lots of cake and okay. So here's where I am on the ideal year, and I like the idea that my ideal day is a variation of a theme that I can perpetuate, meaning it transitions into my ideal week quite nicely.
Mhm.
And I feel the same with my ideal year. I feel like it's just a continuation of that balance, and that's what it seems to be going down. There was one thing I want to address, and I want to do from my perspective as well as yours, meaning you've described your ideal year as well. I'm wondering what changes would you make to make that ideal more ideal? Or are you already fully there? Are you fully actualized? If you're not, what would you change to get closer to that ideal situation?
Okay, so actually, next, I think I'm actually pretty close on my ideal year. I was gonna follow up, like, do you have like a seasonality idea? Like, is there something you look forward to in the spring, summer, fall, winter? But I think I'm close on the ideal year, but not quite as close on the ideal week, or somewhere in the middle, because I would like to try and be able to play golf with my friends more often. But because our calendars are so hard, mostly related to kind of kids schedules, we try and look like 3-4 months in advance just to find a random Saturday that we're all available, or Sunday, or like literally any day of the week that we're all four available at the same time. And we get something like, okay, we have this like 3-hour window between noon and 3 p.m. on this one Saturday. Like, we can't play around a golf in a 3-hour window. We're
Golf's
not
a
that
tough
good.
one.
But it was like that's the closest thing I can think of. It's like I would like to be able to incorporate this more
Yeah.
into my life. And ideally, I don't want to play more than once a month, but if I can get once every other month, like 6 to 8 times a year would be nice. And I'm probably at like 3 to 4. And so, like, I don't know if that's a week or month or a year. I think that's probably more of an ideal year thing, I guess. Because again, all the other things that I've described between kids, sports, and all our vacations, like, have just made it impossible. We have added a round of golf to our fantasy football draft weekend, so like that's one. I never got at least one.
Yeah.
But again, we have to remove all the other responsibilities to be able to fit it in. But that I do think about that. I'd like to try and do that just a little bit more. I'd say I'm pretty good on kind of skiing, snowboarding, pretty good on travel. Um, and my wife and I have done a pretty good job of like looking for opportunities to take long weekends by ourselves. But yeah, that's the only thing I can think of for change. In terms of an ideal year, ideal week. I'll let you answer. What would you change while I think about if I have any other changes?
Right. Okay. Sure. Yeah. What's also kind of caused me to shift into different sub careers every couple of years. Like when I first graduated, I did more of like finance and banking, and then I did in the middle phase of my career more like options, and then the next phase of my career I did hedge funds, and now I'm doing wealth management and financial planning. Right. I feel like there's this sense of wanting to explore something new and different, and understand some new space, not get too comfortable. And in the past my mind has kind of forced me in that, because I got to a point where I just wanted that shift, and
Yeah.
I've done that. And in the past I've also told myself maybe I'm just burnt out and I want something new. But I think it's also a part of just kind of who I am, wanting to engage with new ideas and new things, and learn new concepts and put it to work. So I feel like some type of cadence like that may need to be part of, my continuing evolution. I'm not sure what that next phase will be, but
Okay.
what I started to transition more into over the past year or so is getting more into hobbies, something I've left off of my checklist, my life for the past decade or two. I used to do it a lot when I was a kid, and now I'm picking it up. I mentioned this to you, Aaron. I don't know if it was in one of these conversations or offline. I'm doing carpentry now, and I'm playing around with sawing boards and hammering and things like that. So I think, yeah, those types of projects I want to add more focus to and see if I can grow in that area. That's part of my my shift to incorporate more of that into my ideal week and year.
Okay. Are you going to build your own shed to now be your workshop?
Right. I got to look into that. So I'm starting slow. The first thing I had to build was the sawhorses so I can actually do things. And then I built a bench, and next is a picnic table I'm working on. And I'll get to structures that I feel comfortable being under rather than on top of.
Okay. I'd say I feel much more comfortable with structures with a roof than I do with weight-bearing structures.
Well, I figured you're a foot off the ground. Worst case, you drop a foot rather than.
For me, I think of it as my kids playing on it.
Yeah.
They sit down and it looks like it holds my weight, and they're like knocking it over. Like, is it weight bearing in all directions? They're definitely gonna move it. They're gonna climb on the table.
Right. No, these are all fair points and stuff that I need to consider for each project.
You're gonna knock the table over. Can the legs stay on when the table's sideways, or is it just like the leverage of the leg gonna break it?
Yeah, I'm hoping the plans that I'm working off of have thought that through beyond. Yeah, what might come up.
I'm trying to think, because I remember during COVID, I built a clubhouse in the backyard. I'm really proud of, but I haven't tried building anything in a while. I don't, but I also don't know that I miss it right now. I've been enjoying playing Zelda. I think that's Zelda, fantasy football, kids coach. I've been doing a lot of coaching between 3 kids and 3 different sports. I've been enjoying that a lot, but it's
Zelda update. I too have. I finally beat the first one, Breath of the Wild.
Okay. Have you started on Tears of the Kingdom yet?
No, I want to take a break actually.
Okay.
So my wife was like, "Do you want another game?" And I'm like, "Nah, I think I'm gonna pause on that for a bit."
Okay.
And yeah, I'm gonna go back to something a little more simple.
Because my son because he played the first one, and he has a little more time, usually on weekend mornings, to play. He is so farther ahead of me. My 7-year-old, for the first one, I was always a little bit ahead of him, so I could help him out and show him how to do something if I could see him before, if he needed some help.
Yeah.
Now he's just so far beyond me that.
Wow, that's great. That's not an easy game, but if it's anything like the first one, there is some trickiness to it.
Yeah, he's picked it up pretty well. But
wow, that's awesome.
So, okay, I think we should probably end right here, because I think if we start something else, it'll be another 20 minutes. But I do want to get back to the idea of W2 versus entrepreneur, what. I think that's important for us to acknowledge of what can we do because we designed our life that way that doesn't always work for our clients because they're still W2 employees. I think that's an important conversation.
Yeah, I don't want to say one good but the other evil, or put a
correct
that type of spin on it. I just think. Yeah, I don't want to open it.
Yeah. Let's try that next time.
Yes, maybe that's a good segue. TBD.
It's a teaser for next month.
Right. Well, good stuff. Okay.
I always love these conversations with you, Trishul. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I love this conversation as well. I think it always comes down to, it's not about coming up with a firm plan of this is my ideal day, I'm going to stick to it for the rest of my life. It's always about, this is the process of planning, about talking about it and thinking it through and seeing how we feel about this and that. So I think it's always welcome to continue these conversations and encourage them. So this was a good one for sure. Yep. So thanks everybody for listening. If you're enjoying these conversations, do spread the word, like, share, and subscribe.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of the Mind Money Spectrum podcast. Be sure to visit mindmoneyspectrum.com to access the entire library of episodes. Remember, it's not black and white, but the wide spectrum of gray area where you get to pursue the freedoms you want in life. Opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical as no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Have a nice day.